All right, ladies, and welcome to another self love conversation. As you know, it is the month of February, and February is Black History Month. Here at the I'm Loving Me Project, we are outlining all of the amazing women, the amazing businesses, the amazing activists, the amazing moms, everyone who is working hard and making sure that they do their part to allow people to understand and know what the African American experience is about. And today we have the amazing Kimberly A. Morrow uh, with us, and she is the founder of Educators Leading Change. Is that
Leading
correct?
the change. Yes, leading the change. Yes.
Yes. And she has been on with us before. You guys seen her interview she did with us a while back on her son, right?
Yes. Yes.
And now we're going to talk about how we actually can engage our children in African American things, discoveries, and all of that. So Kimberly, thank you so much for being here again. How you been?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me back on. I appreciate it. I'm excited. I'm
Absolutely.
excited. This is my favorite month.
I know. So tell us exactly some of the things that you do and some of the things that your organization does.
So, one of the things that I do that I've been doing for many years as a classroom teacher is having my students do family tree projects.
That's a
Um,
good idea.
and it's awesome because this year's 2021 theme for Black History Month is the Black family, representation, diversity, and oh shoot, I forgot the third thing. It
Representation,
begins with an
family.
I. It'll come to me. My brain. I've got
I
brain
got
fog
you.
right now.
Uh-huh.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
Because I've been thinking about it all week. And so one of the reasons why I love having my students, and of course I have my children do it, and I've been doing it for years, is because when we see ourselves in history, we understand how important it is and how important our contributions are to history.
Right.
A lot of times in school, and I'm sure you'll attest to this, in school, it starts off with our history begins with slavery.
Correct.
That's one chapter that they'll cover. And then the next time we have talks about our history again, it's the civil rights movement.
That is correct.
So what we know about our history is either we were slaves or we were fighting and we were struggling.
That's right.
But there's so many things in between that.
Hmm.
There's so much history in that. And what I find interesting, which is why I love having students do the family tree, because when we start talking about these other events in history, it starts to click with them like, oh, wait a minute. My grandfather was in the Vietnam War, or my great grandfather was in World War II. Oh, my family had a business.
Right.
And all of these things, they start to realize that our history is so much more than
Right.
what the textbook says it is.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that I would immediately have parents do, because it's something that doesn't require money.
Right. And you know what I'm thinking? It's enlightening. I was doing another podcast with a young lady who is here in Atlanta who collects jewelry and other fine trinkets from the Victorian era from African Americans, right?
Wow.
And so the
Wow.
way that she tells the story of, the fashion back then and the brooches they wore and the chains and the jewelry, I said to myself, I said, well, where are these things? She was like, she's a antique collector. And she said, I collect from like 100 years old. And just looking at the pieces, it just inspires you. So when I looked on her Instagram, it was these pictures that she have and found of people, of African American people with jewelry on, right? The brooches and everything from the Victorian period. And immediately I got excited, but then I got sad. The reason why I got sad, Kim, is because when you read the caption of most of these, it says unidentified Black man, unidentified woman, unidentified couple. And so I'm saying to myself, this could be your cousin, my cousin, family members, people who really contributed to society. There's a reason why that they took these pictures, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
But we will never know who they are, and they get brushed to the side,
So true.
right?
So true. So
And
true.
so I agree with you. There are so many things that African Americans have done over the time. It's not just slavery and, the civil rights and struggle. You have, this whole period where they were, writing poetry and dancing and doing all these things. It's like, but where can they go for this information? That is the thing, because it's sort of like the Bible to me, right? It's the stories that are passed down, but they are never being written.
Right.
Anywhere where you can actually sit down with your kid and say, hey, this is it. So, how do we start to incorporate that? And where can we get this real information from?
Well, it's a number of ways. First of all, we start with our family members. And the reason why I say that is I actually had to do a family history project,
Mhm.
and I had to interview my family members. And I learned that my grandfather, who was born in 1889, had graduated from Lane College.
Really?
Had no idea, because when we were taught, it's Black people were not educated and they couldn't afford to go to school. So, and here I found out my grandfather, who I
Hmm.
known,
Right.
had graduated from Lane College and had been a teacher. I never knew
Wow.
I never knew that. So a lot of times, if we just start with our family, we'll learn things. But then to go beyond that, when they begin to tell us things, because I researched after I found out he went to Lane College. Then I looked up Lane College.
Right. Right.
And I learned that at one time Booker T. Washington had come to Lane College to speak. And so I was like, oh my God, I
Oh my
think my
God.
grandfather was there during that time period. And so just things like that, once we get a little bit of information, then we take that information and we continue to dig into it or research it. Because I'll tell you, if we're looking for one book or one place that has all of the information, we're going to be hard pressed to find that book. Sure, of course they have some really good
The
history
stars
books out
that you, yeah, the stars that you hear about over and over again, though the stars are in the book,
there.
right?
Right, right.
But it's like I was telling a young lady the other day, because we were just talking about health and women and everything. And I was just like, has anyone ever heard of this woman, Sarah Botman? Just how, she was this woman who was in the circus. She was in the circus because her labia was huge than any other woman, female that they ever seen. And she was so tall, right?
Wow.
And they thought that she was this kind of creature, but a lot of men were so intrigued by her that they wanted to be with her and sleep with her because she had this abnormality going on, right? And then you come to find out that this is something that a lot of women go through, and they're like, wow, I wish I would have known a little bit more information about who she was. I wish I would have known a little bit about, who these writers were, who these jazz musicians were. And it's like, because they, again, could have been a cousin or family member who migrated to the north, who decided to have a better life. Your family decided to stay until, and now this big gap of history is missing, and you really can't piece it together. Even when you're in the family, Kimberly, there's information that does not go that far back. So, do you recommend doing like the family tree, going on the different sites and all that
Yes.
stuff for these kids? And
Yes.
how would they do that? Where, because sometimes it gets a little bit confusing where you don't know who's who or how to start, you know?
So one of the things that I would teach my students is, okay, so first you start with your immediate family and then you start to branch out. And
Mhm.
then once you have some information like their date of birth, where they were born, and if they are deceased, when they died or where they lived when they died, then you can start plugging that information into a database.
Okay.
I personally use ancestry.com, and that's because I've just had an account with them since 2008. Now I understand there are others out there. A former student of mine just told me about africanancestry.com. So
Mm.
I know that there are other ones out there. It just so happens that my account is with ancestry.com, and I've been with them for years. And I actually have gotten in touch with other family members because I was looking up my grandmother's side,
Mhm.
and it put me on to an entire white family in
Wow.
Utah. But it was a part of my grandmother's family because I went down that line and I found her name and her father's name on their tree.
Wow.
And so that's just another way it'll lead you in different directions.
Mhm.
So using those databases are a great way to learn more information. I'll tell you something else I found. I
What's that?
found my grandfather's World War I draft card.
Wow.
Yes, with his signature on it.
Now
Because
that is amazing.
yes, yes. And I had heard the story that he had fought in World War I. He had, been stationed in France, but
Yeah,
to see the draft card
I
from 19,
know.
I think the date on there was 1916 or 1917, something like that. But it's
Mhm.
whoa. So it's confirmation that the stories were true, that
Right.
he really was in World War I. And so I love those. I love the databases because they're very helpful. But I tell you, before technology,
Yeah.
I had to do it the old-fashioned way back in the
Mhm.
90s. I actually had to go to the National Archive,
That's right. Me
get the
too.
microfiche, and look at
Yep.
the census reports
Yep.
and look at the different books that have different family histories. So if we have any that are still old fashioned and are like, well, forget the computer, where can I look it up?
Right.
They can go to the National Archives when everything opens back up.
Hopefully soon.
They can go to the National Archives. There are certain societies like the Mormon Church has a lot of um, African American family history information.
Mhm.
I found out in the 90s when I first started getting into this.
Right.
So there are definitely there are ways to find this information aside from on the computer.
And now, and this is a question that I have for you. And now, I don't know if you feel it, but this is like the year of the Black woman.
Yeah.
Like the year, it's just like a feeling of, you know, you either have to protect the Black woman, you're getting all these accolades for being a Black woman. You are, it's like this is something is brewing inside where, because of the police brutality and because of all the things that's been happening, these young people want to know why. They want to be able to challenge the status quo. They want to be able to be independent and be their own person, which I think is amazing, right?
Hmm.
And when we're talking about standing on the shoulders of those who who came before us, I don't even think they realize just how much their independence has allowed them to break free. It's kind of like, for me, thinking that history is sort of repeating itself in a different way, where they're starting to question when we went through that period of enlightenment, and you had all these writers and people who came alive. I feel like we are in that era again, and that door is opening. Do you feel that way? And what are some of the things that young people can do to reach out and grab everything? Because right now everything is Black Lives Matter. They're pouring all this money into these programs to support, African American movies and finance and business. But it's like, how do we tap into that? And thinking of the children who are, they are running after it and they want it. They believe that they're entitled to it. Would you agree with that?
Right, right, right.
You know?
Well, let me just say that when you say, I'm a back up to when you said we stand on people's shoulders. One of
That's
the
right.
things that I think is really important, especially for our young ladies, is for us to really find out who these Black women were. Now, I hope you can
Thank
see
you.
my shirt that I have on here. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes, I
This
can.
is the first woman, the first documented Black woman who enlisted in the United States Army under a man's name.
Wow.
And she served in the US Army for about 2 years before they found out she was a woman.
Wow.
And she was discharged. But then she went on to become the first woman Buffalo Soldier.
Mm.
And it's these strong women, for our girls to know that we come from a long line of strong women, entrepreneurs, writers, dancers, artists, business women, politicians, soldiers. And so right now, where you are, where these young people are, they are in such a unique spot. We've had the women and men who have done the hard work for us. They've paved that way. They have
That's right.
put in, fought the battles for us. And
Mhm.
so right now it is their time. It is the young people's time to reap the rewards and reap the benefits. And so what I say to them is, don't be afraid. Be fearless.
Mhm. That's
Go
right.
for it. Do it. Just as Nike says,
Absolutely.
just do it. Just
Absolutely.
do it. I have a daughter who works on the show Blackish.
Hmm.
She's a writer's assistant.
Okay.
And she recently was thinking, oh, I want to move into a bigger apartment. Then she started, oh, but the show, this might be its last season. I said, Kim Maria, that is a year away. You are in a great space. You are so creative. You are a writer. I am claiming
Absolutely.
it for you. You are going to be bigger than where you are right now. So don't be afraid. Just go
Mhm.
for it. And she called me later and said, I'm so glad you said that to me, because I tend to, stop myself. I go, no,
Sure.
we have to stop sabotaging ourselves.
Absolutely.
And the big
Absolutely.
thing is just get out of your own way. Stop being afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that my students would always tell me is, when I would ask, well, what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of failing. That's basically
Yeah,
what it is. I'm afraid of making a mistake. I'm afraid of failing.
that's right.
So you fail
That's right.
and you
Yeah.
learn and you keep going. It's
I,
okay to fail.
I tell the young people all the time, I'm like, you are supposed to go out there and make mistakes. Parents used to kick us out when you turned 18 and tell you, go out into the world and figure it out. And
Mhm.
you're sitting there saying, well, what am I supposed to do? And they'll tell you, you'll figure it out as you go along. If you fall and you bump your head and it's bad, you can come home, but then you got to get back out, right?
Right.
Because life, this is what life is, and this is how you start to live your life. And
Exactly.
when you have the history behind you, which is what I think is important, and I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing, you can understand and have that confidence and that affirmation and that belief that if they did it in worse conditions
Yes.
with nothing,
Yes.
I mean, when I say nothing, starting from ground zero, below zero,
Yes.
to at least accomplishing something, you can do anything that you put your mind to and you can go beyond, because what you understand is it is not, if you are able to go ahead and play a bad hand, whatever the result is, whatever the result is, that next hand is going to get you somewhere because you're going to get something out of that bad hand,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, a lot of times fear, we allow fear to keep us paralyzed, and we're afraid to make a mistake.
Right,
And and that is the worst thing. Just we have to have faith. We
right.
just have to have faith. And I'll tell you, I come from a long line on both mother's side and father's side of strong women,
I believe that. Hmm.
strong Black women who are like no nonsense.
Right.
And whenever I get down, all I have to think about is my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, and I go, okay, now what are you complaining about? What are
Correct.
you afraid of? They did
Hmm.
it in the 40s and the 50s
That's
and
right.
the 1800s.
And
So you
Anne
can
had
certainly
11
do it now.
kids and 10 grandkids, and I
Exactly.
can't even fathom that, you know. But so you're saying that in order for us to start to expose our children, it is uh, it is good to take them to museums. It is good to get them out there. What are some of the other things that we can do, especially now that we're in a pandemic? What do you suggest that how we get this word out to start to educate our kids?
Well, even though we're in a pandemic, I was talking to my dad the other day, and and we were just talking about how we used to just watch old movies. I
Oh
would,
yeah, Eyes
um,
on the Prize. We used to watch that.
do you remember Soldier Story?
Yes, I do.
Soldier
Yes, I
Story. We
do.
used to watch that all the time. That's how I gained an appreciation for Black soldiers during
Yep.
World War II. We used
Hmm.
to watch Lady Sings the Blues,
Yep.
even though it's a cool movie, but it was about a jazz singer and about that age, that time
Right.
period. And so I think sometimes, we forget about just watching old movies and reading some books. And nowadays, you don't even have to go to the library. All you have to do is get it on your phone,
That's true.
you
And you
know?
know what? I'm glad you brought that up because it's like when we were younger, that's exactly what we did. We watched movies and they would say, "Hey, Roots is on, go watch that." You know, or we'll watch it as a family. And as kids, we would say, "Did this really happen?" And they're like, "Oh, this is just a movie, honey. It was way worse than this." And then all of a sudden you're watching Mississippi Burning, and then they would introduce you to other movies, and you're sitting there and you're like, wow, I can't even believe that you lived through all of this.
Right,
you
right,
know
right.
I used to tell my grandmother all the time, I'm like, so who were you for back in the day? Were you a Martin Luther King person or you a Malcolm X person? And she would tell me, she was like, well, they both had their own styles of the way that they were teaching and preaching. Well, we grew up in New York, so even though she believed in some of the king's values, she also went to some of the mosque and some of the workshops that they was doing that night because she wanted to hear both sides. And so I would tell her, I said, so you actually got to see Malcolm X, and she was like, yeah, he would be all around in Harlem and speaking everywhere. And it was just like second nature,
Right, right,
you
right.
know, and I
Mhm.
think that's important because it goes back to like what you said. The stories help you,
Yes, yes.
you
They
know.
they truly do. It's funny that you should say that. My my parents were Martin Luther King Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And the Black Panthers were big in the late 60s when my parents were living in Los Angeles. And
Right.
once I started doing some reading and I read the Angela Davis's book, I realized, I said, wait a minute, this, they used to hand out these flyers right on the corner of where my mother would have caught the
Mm-hmm.
bus to go to work. So I
Mm-hmm.
asked my mother one day, I said, did you ever see the Black Panther? She said, yes. I said, did you ever go to any of their meetings? She said, oh no, I crossed the street. When I saw them, I was afraid of them. I said, you wouldn't take one of their flyers? She said, oh no, no, no. So there were, and she was from the South. So
Right.
her and my dad were both from the South. So they are, Martin Luther
Yeah.
King people. And to them, the Black Panthers were this radical group and they
Right.
were afraid of them. So, yeah, but that was a story. It was like, and I knew, I believed that she did see them because, like I said, when I'm reading the book and they said where they were, the corner of Western and Adams, I was like, I know that area. We
Yeah.
used to live over there. My mother would have taken the bus over there. And when I asked her, she confirmed it. I said, wow.
Absolutely. And just to sum up everything, the beauty is when you know, like when I go home and everything, and you are on the corner of Malcolm X Boulevard, because that's where, he used to speak a lot. And, you're on Joseph E. Lowry here in Atlanta, or you go to the King Center here in Atlanta, and you get to see his house, and you get to see the bed he slept in and the room that he shared with his family. You have to feel something, right?
Yes,
And the the thing that I love about um, going back in time is when you do feel it, you feel a sense of pride at the same time.
yes,
It's always a sense of pride because you know that you can do or have or be anything you want because these people decided decided that they were not going to allow someone to tell them that they could not do something.
exactly. Absolutely.
And when I say decide, I mean they made a decision that hell or high water, this is what it's going to be. And
Absolutely.
because of that, I'm going to get out here and I'm going to raise my voice, just like some other rebel that we know called Jesus, who did the same thing,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. Amen. Yes.
Yeah, because when you put it all together, that's exactly what it is,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? When you put it all together, that's exactly what it is. Someone who defied the norm because they saw something and they said, no, this is not how it's supposed to be, not in my life,
Right.
right? And
Right.
all those who agree with me, come follow me, right? So
Right.
tell us about Educators Leading the Change. Tell us how to follow you, and tell us what you're doing for Black History Month.
Okay, so Educators Leading the Change, I actually founded it during the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted a space where educators could get some resources and some workshop training. So I hosted a conference right at the start of the pandemic just to try to help educators get some guidance as to how they can come back in the fall and really engage with their students.
Really
And
good.
so one of the things I'm personally doing for Black History Month is I'll be doing a free webinar
Yeah.
on how to do your family tree. So it's genealogy 101.
Oh,
And
good. That's
so a
great.
lot of what I taught my students, I'll be hopefully teaching other teachers and parents how they can use this as a tool to get their children engaged in history, not only history, but our history, Black history. And so I'll be offering that. I also have a number of things on my site. I have a calendar that I created, which is called teach the children the truth. So it's celebrating Black history from January through December. And what I decided to do was choose the people that we don't always hear about. So the usual four: Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, are not on the calendar. Not that they
Right.
are not important, but I put people on there that don't get as much publicity. So you have Crispus Attucks, you
Yeah.
have Carter G. Woodson, who is the father of Black history, who's the one that came up with the idea of having a
Charles
week to
Drew.
celebrate it. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because for all of the years that I've taught, every February, my students would always say, why did they give us February? They just gave us February because it's the shortest month of the year. And I would say, who gave us February?
Right.
And they would say, well, they did. Who's they? I
Right.
said, Black History Month was chosen, or it was a week. It started off as a week.
It
Carter
did.
G. Woodson chose the second week of February in honor of Abraham Lincoln
Hmm.
and Frederick Douglass's birthdays. That's why February was chosen, not because it was the shortest month of the year. And
Right.
they're always so shocked. They're always so shocked.
I
And
know
but
they are.
those are the things that our students are no longer being taught. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if I was ever taught that or if that's
Right.
something I learned as I got older.
Right.
But that is not anything that they're being taught. It's not explained to them why February is African American History Month or Black History Month. You know, how did it evolve from being a week to being
Hmm.
a month? They
No.
don't teach that. It's simply, oh, February, and then we're throwing some, throwing a bunch of stuff at them,
Right.
which let's do this all year long.
Right. And then you gotta be like, oh well, slavery happened and then this happened. It's like, no. I remember, and then I'll let you go. I was in elementary school and we learned about the choir from Fisk who saved a school because they went around and they sang, right? So they was this choir. And what we had to do, and I'm maybe like 8 years old, 9 years old, right? What we had to do is we had to sing some of their songs, right? So we had this assembly in school. And the first song, and I still remember all these years: Black boys are born of heroes, ancient heroes, biblical heroes, historical heroes, present day heroes, discoverers, scientists never came forth as such. All Black boys are born of heroes. And I said to myself, wow, I don't even know what I was singing back then. And one of the things that they did was that they start naming all these names of all of these heroes that came from Black men, and all of the boys in the assembly would go around with their picture. So you had King Tut, Crispus Attucks, Charles Drew, all these people to teach you about Black history. And I said, man, just the amount of information that you remember through music, through writing, that is very powerful because that's something that I never forgot.
It is. And it's such a shame that it's no longer being done anymore.
Right,
It
exactly.
really is not. And I don't know why. It's sad. It's sad. I'll tell you, I was at a school district. I was at a particular high school for nearly 10 years. Um, and the entire time I was there, it wasn't until my last year there that the principal did something for Black History Month, like
Hmm.
school wide.
Right.
And that was my last year there.
Wow.
And my last year there was just last year.
Mm.
Yes.
Wow.
I was there from 2008 until last year.
Yeah.
And that was the first time, and it was a different principal, but it was the first time we ever did anything. And I was like, wow. And I've been here all this time.
Well, I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing now. And definitely we will share your webinar and everything. Make sure you send us the links
I will.
so that we
I
can
definitely
share
will.
on our page. But Kimberly, this was a great conversation. I mean, you sparked something in me where I started singing, something that I've learned when I was 8 years old, but I never forgot it, right?
Right.
You
Right.
know, and that's the impact, and that's basically what you're saying. And when you open that door and you have that dialogue and you introduce and you get them to sing and you get them to watch and see, it is something that they never forget.
Yes, it is.
And
Yes.
that's how you expose.
Yes.
So definitely send us the link. We'll see if we can get our parents on with their kids. And I thank you for doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. You have a
Absolutely.
great evening.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.